onto your butt.
Da-da-da. Oh, hello.
Welcome to episode 165 of the Civil War Breakfast Club podcast. Tonight, as always, I am joined by Darren, the most awesome Civil War nerd I know, and I am Mary, his co-host who cannot do an introduction to save my life.
Hi, Mary.
Hi, Darren.
What's going? Great introduction as always.
Yep.
Fantastic introduction. What's going on? How are you?
Well, now that I'm over that, and honestly, I've stopped worrying about it during the day when I have to host.
All day long you've been thinking about that. Well, you give it something different, which is appreciated. So, we're recording again, Mary. We are recording again. So what's on your mind? How you been?
So, been good. It's been a couple weeks since we last recorded. Our last episode, we got to record with our friend Dave Taylor, who is going to be doing his first Lincoln assassination booth escape route tour this weekend.
That is coming up. It is true. It's going to be a Six Semper Saturday.
Yep.
They're going to be doing that. So hopefully people can do that. So hopefully people enjoy that episode. He's a good friend of ours. We enjoy having that on. Anyways, it's just us two again, back riding the saddle again, Mary, just you and I.
Yep. So how are you and what are you drinking?
I am doing fantastic. It is soft serving sunshine here, Mary, and I am drinking it's called Argyle IPA from around the corner's Appalachian Brewing Company, and I'm drinking it out of my Mary Surratt coffee mug because it's sort of not about specific to the episode, but sort of kind of. What about yourself?
Well, I'm also drinking the same as you, Argyle IPA, just down the street from the wonderful Appalachian Brewing Company here in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, and I am drinking it out of my I Dream of a Brighter Atlanta Sherman mug, because why not?
Nothing wrong with that.
Nothing wrong with a little Uncle Billy.
Definitely. But I don't know, listen, Mary, I don't know if you know this, but this month is Women's History Month, and all of women in American history are being celebrated. Very, very few are as important and underappreciated more than the woman we're going to talk about tonight, and that is Dr. Mary Edwards Walker. Now, in an era where women were expected to stay in the background, not do anything to men, she broke the mold. I mean, she was an abolitionist, a spy, a prisoner of war, a key in the women's suffrage movement, someone who forever changed women's fashion, and just the second woman in American history to earn a medical degree. Oh, and by the way, Mary, she's the only woman to this date to have received the Medal of Honor.
Mm-hmm, she is. And she was, as you said, she's an abolitionist. She's very ahead of her time. She changes women's fashion. And that's because her parents, she's the daughter of Alva and Vesta Walker. And she had four older sisters. Two of her older sisters, one was called Luna and the other was called Aurora Borealis. And she also had a younger brother. Her parents were very progressive, and all the children were raised that way. And she was taught to think for herself, question theology, and and also challenge gender roles. And her parents did this themselves. Her father would often help out with household chores that were seen as women's work at the time. So like cooking and all that. And her mother would be involved in heavy labor, which would typically be the man's role.
And she's interesting. I mean, she's born November 26th of 1832 in Oswego, New York. And like you said, she's the fifth of six children to Dr. Alva Walker and his wife Vesta. All women except for one poor boy named Alva. You mentioned Luna, Aurora, Vesta, and Cynthia. And you could tell by the names that her parents were a little out there. They were really ultra progressives. Now, in upstate New York and parts of Massachusetts in the 1830s, alternative religions and theories of overall equality, they're developing. And the Walkers were a part of it. We talked a lot about, when we talked about John Brown thing a couple months ago, about New York's Albany, Syracuse, Oswego, that area of a very pro-abolitionist progressive area. And, Dr. Alva Walker and his wife Vesta, they weren't just progressives, they were capital A abolitionists to the point that probably made William Lloyd Garrison blush. They're free thinkers. Their home was a stop on the Underground Railroads of Canada. And they taught those six children the importance of equality, especially gender equality. And again, this is extremely unusual. I mean, I can imagine a home of six women promoting gender equality was probably a good way of self-preservation for Dr. Walker. We never saw the inside of a bathroom. No question about that.
No, and the other thing too is Mary is growing up on a farm, and because of that, she helps out with chores. And so she's often likely with her mother, who did a lot of the farm chores, kind of the heavy labor, as I said before. And she often wore men's clothing because women's clothing at the time were felt to be too constrictive for doing outdoor chores. But another interesting thing is her mother held the viewpoint that corsets and tight lacings were unhealthy. And Mary is going to carry this throughout her entire life.
Absolutely. And, she was taught, basically coeducationally, because her father, Alva, he actually founded a school in Oswego for his neighbors that welcomed girls as well as boys. And not just equality, but they believe in strict adherence to temperance to their kids. None of their children, including Mary, ever touched alcohol, thus proving there was an actual woman named Mary who didn't drink. So first time for everything.
I was about to say maybe she was friends with Howard.
Oh, yeah, maybe. But the Walkers even challenged, like you said, women's traditional clothing. And the girls, like Mary, they never wore those Victorian era dresses, the corsets, and they wore trousers. Now, Mary wore those men trousers, like you said, with a short skirt in public. And like you said, she never veered off of it. She ran into trouble socially down the road in her later years for it, but she never veered off of it. The Bloomers, they called them, and named after a woman's activist named Amelia Bloomer. And it was known as a reform costume. And this was Mary's choice of attire her entire life. And she never veered off of it.
No, she always wore that. And the other thing too is Mary believed that even as a woman, she should be permitted to perform whatever work she chose, and that she was entitled to the same treatment as a man. And believing this in the 19th century, I mean, as we know from studying this era, that is not the case. So this is a very progressive belief that she has. So, it's not surprising how Mary lives her life.
It was. The fashion thing, it's funny, the fashion thing ends up being to go on to epitomize the women's right movement right through the early 1900s too. And Mary's father, Alva, he was a self-taught doctor. He was a country doctor and no real medical training, but he was always interested in medicine. He was self-taught. His library was full of medical books, which he always read. He didn't just post pics of the ones he bought on Facebook. He actually read them. But for this reason, Mary grew up and quickly adopted her father's passion and also began to study medicine. And soon she decided to dedicate her life's work to become a doctor. Mm-hmm. Okay. And this wasn't done at this point. As a teen, Mary was a teacher and did for a very short period of time. And she did that for a couple of years, but in 1853, she applies and was accepted into the Syracuse Medical College to pursue a degree and a career in medicine. Mm-hmm. Now, by medicine, I don't mean just merely being a nurse. No. I mean a doctor, which again was unheard of in that era, as only men were allowed to hold that career. Now, the thing about it, though, there was some precedent a little bit that was set when a British woman named Elizabeth Blackwell, she enrolled in medical school at Geneva College, which, if you know your schools, Mary, which I know you don't, it's now William and Hobart School, Smith School in Geneva, New York. And the medical part of that school is actually part of Syracuse University now. Blackwell will become the first American woman in history to earn a degree in medicine in 1849. And it is it's in Blackwell's footsteps that Mary Walker is going to follow when she enrolls at Syracuse Medical College.
Mm-hmm. The other thing, too, about Mary is that throughout her life, even from a young age, right through to her medical school, she's very well educated. And again, this is something that it's starting to become more common for women in the 19th century, but it's not the mainstream. And she's able to attend several different schools, including the one founded by her parents. She attends the Foley Seminary in Fulton, New York. And this is where she's introduced again to contemporary social reforms like gender roles, education, hygiene. And this is what sparks her interest in medicine. And she's going to spend a lot of her free time reading her father's medical texts.
And that's the thing, too, is she's following her father's footsteps. Yeah. And obviously she's very proud of that. But I know it becomes a lifetime passion of hers. A lot of people, they you want to be an astronaut when you're a kid. You want to be a paleontologist.
That's what I wanted to be.
Of course, but it doesn't happen.
No.
Because you're so short. But I mean, for the most part, she's stuck with it. And she's like one of those few people who finds their passion young in life and just stays with it.
Yep. And she's also very lucky in that she's able to study under Dr. Stephen Potter, who was the school's founder at Syracuse Medical College. He taught surgery and I can't say it. Anyway, it's childbirth. When she attended Syracuse Medical School, she's able to attend lectures. She interns with a licensed doctor, and she worked as a subscription agent for Dr. Potter's journal, the American Medical and Surgical Journal, which he edited. In 1855, Mary is going to graduate with honors and was the only woman in her class.
And the thing what's important to know about the Syracuse Medical School, though, this wasn't a traditional medical school. And at the time, it was considered eclectic, meaning it taught different ideas and focused on research. So what they tested ideas to see if it worked on patients versus the accepted concepts, which was just you did what you knew worked. So this school was very ahead of its time. And this theory of education and medical training is going to be adopted with Mary, and it's going to cause issues with doctors later in her life. Now, you mentioned February 20th, 1855, Mary graduates from her 12-student class at Syracuse Medical College with honors. She got along well with classmates, especially with one named Albert Eber Miller. Mm-hmm. It seems, Mary, they weren't just training together to be doctors. They were also playing doctor. You got it. With each other. They certainly were. 9 months after their graduation, and after a brief stint living in Ohio, of all places, Mary and Albert Miller are going to get married. Now, this wasn't a traditional wedding. They get married in 1855. Mary is going to wear that bloomer costume, long trousers and a short skirt. She refused to say, "Obey your husband" during the vows. The reverend who performed the ceremony allowed this because he was kind of a free-thinking, radical abolitionist Unitarian. Mm-hmm. She also kept the maiden name of Walker, too. I know she said she did Miller, Walker, here and there.
She kept it because she said, a name is as dear to her as a man's is to him.
Yeah, so and again, this is not, now it's common, but back then this never happened. So now married, Mary and Albert, they're going to open separate medical practices in the same building in Rome, New York, under the name Doctors Miller and Walker. But unfortunately for Mary, her practice and marriage only lasted about 4 years.
Yep. Because Mary discovered that Albert had been unfaithful to her, and she demanded a divorce from him, which was difficult for a woman to get at the time. Even in a more progressive state like New York, a woman had to prove the man's adultery, and New York had a 5-year waiting period for a divorce to be carried out. So during the 19th century, most women had to live with it if their husbands had been unfaithful. Albert suggested this to her, he's like, why don't you just live with it? But Mary said she would never be with a man so vile as to make such a proposition to a wife, and that people who thought her so happy knew little of her wretchedness. Mary also stated that if it is right to be legally married, it is right to be legally divorced. To be deprived of a divorce is like being shut up in prison because someone attempted to kill you. It is just as honorable to get out of matrimonial trouble legally as to be freed from any other wrong. So she feels very strongly about this.
It's not like there wasn't proof. I mean, she was cheating. He knocked up a woman. He fathered a child out of wedlock with somebody else. That's usually a pretty good giveaway. It's not just finding someone's Tinder profile, Mary. I mean, that's what ultimately happened. But this goes against the social norms. When she files for divorce, it's extremely rare. It's going to ultimately take her 10 full years for this to happen. But when she does it, it's going to be another reform she's going to do. She's going to basically help divorce reform for women going forward when she does. Because her experience with the law surrounding divorce led her on a crusade to help change divorce laws, which created a lot of reforms that are still reflected today in modern divorce law.
And it's not until she does not get the divorce, flash forward until 1869.
And 10 years later. And, fun fact, by the way, after they were separated, Albert Miller became a high-ranking Freemason and Templar in New York and Massachusetts. You know where he died? Orleans, Massachusetts, on Cape Cod in 1913. Wow. He's buried in Needham, Mass., so he's a local.
Interesting.
But after their separation, he basically stuck around Rome for a little while and began to write articles from Sybil magazine, which continued to promote gender equality before moving to Iowa to try to expedite her divorce. Now, in Iowa, Walker attends a school called Bowen Collegiate Institute in Hopkinton, Iowa, known today as Lenox College. But she was kicked out after a series of incidents that shocked the administration, mostly due to her refusal to wear traditional women's clothes, as she always wore that reformer costume.
Yeah, and she does open up her own practice in Rome, New York, separately from her husband. And she placed an ad in the Rome Sentinel that said, "Those who prefer the skill of a female physician to that of a male have now an excellent opportunity to make their choice."
Right.
But she unfortunately had to close her practice because she did not get enough patients. Now, this is in 1860, so she's not going to be bored for very long.
No, I mean, people don't want to trust a female doctor. if initially she had a lot of obstetrician, she had some, gynecological type things, but no guy would go see her doctor. I'm not going to lie to you. My doctor's man. I don't, and it's nothing to do with that. I just kind of get weirded out. This is totally, totally different.
Yeah.
She does finally, she leaves Iowa, goes to New York, but then the American Civil War had begun at this point, and she got the idea to join the U.S. Army, where she felt that she was qualified to become, again, not a nurse, but a commissioned doctor. And of her desire to serve, she said in 1861, she said this in a speech, it's, quote, "Some of you who have no patriotism, but to come to gatherings and applaud good speeches, know nothing about patriotism that is willing to die for one's country." And she firmly believed this. She has a medical degree. She has a few years of practice and experience, and they need experienced doctors. Walker feels, hey, I'm qualified. So what does she do? She's going to leave for Washington. And when she gets there, she's going to run straight to the office of guess who? Simon Cameron, Secretary of War. That's who she's going to go. Before she leaves, though, this patriotic and headstrong Walker, she wrote home to her family, and she said, and this is in her letter, quote, "I suppose you will all expected me to go to war, and I thought it would be too cruel to disappoint you." So she's going to war now.
Well, she's also using that attitude she has where she's like, I'm worth exactly what a man is.
Right.
I can be paid that, I can do exactly what a man can do. And this is a belief she never backs off of throughout her entire life.
Yeah. So here's Walker now. She's going to be wearing her trousers and her short skirt, and she's going to walk into Cameron's office. And when he saw her, I mean, you can just imagine, he was stunned when she asked him for a commission in the U.S. Army as a doctor. Cameron literally laughed out loud because he felt that a woman was not qualified to be a doctor in the Army, and he suggested, hey, why don't you just go be a nurse? But she held her ground and said that her intention was going to be a doctor. So if she gets rejected by Cameron, she's going to stick around Washington, and she's going to begin to head to different hospitals, asking their surgeons in charge, for a job as a doctor. Even as a volunteer, she just wants to do it. She'll continue to be turned away until mid-1862 when she found her way to the Indiana Hospital, which was set up in the newly built patent office in Washington. There she'll meet the surgeon in charge. His name is Dr. J.N. Green, who was part of the 19th Indiana Volunteers, who will later on in the war become the Iron Brigade, or part of the Iron Brigade, rather. Green needed doctors badly. You know why? This is just after the Second Battle of Manassas in August of 62, where the 19th Indiana lost 260 of 430 men, over 60% of their total. So Green's desperate. He'll offer Walker a job, and since the government would not pay, since she was a woman, he offered to pay her out of his own salary. Yeah,
he was just grateful to have her help. And as you said, he doesn't have the ability to offer her the job, and he desperately needs more doctors around there. He really needs an assistant surgeon. And while she's working here, Mary does make an impact on the soldiers that she saw, and many soldiers are impressed with her work. And she said the soldiers would say that they had rather see me than have anything brought to them because they knew I knew so much, and they would consult me regarding their cases. So she's quite knowledgeable in what she's doing.
She is. And the thing about it, though, is, she turns down Green's offer to pay her. She says that you have a family. I'm not taking your money. I'm going to do this for free. I'm going to volunteer. Just give me room and board and meals, and I'm good. But you're right. She did impress a lot of people, including Green. Green basically petitioned the U.S. Surgeon General, a guy named Clement Finley, to get her a commission in the Army. She's doing so well. We got to get her a commission. But again, she gets rejected again due to gender. Walker's going to stick around the Indiana Hospital, and there she's going to meet for the first time the United States Army Superintendent of Nurses, Dorothea Dix, who observed Walker in action at the hospital. Dix was not a fan.
No.
And felt that even as a woman, that no woman should work as a doctor in the Army and the military hospital. And they, as you can imagine, they did not get along at all during their time at Indiana Hospital. Walker could not, here's the thing, Walker could not understand how Dix, a woman with no medical experience, or education rather, not even as a nurse, could be offered that job by the same Simon Cameron who rejected her months before. So they butted heads for the rest of the war. and became one of the women that Mary Walker will have issues with, and vice versa throughout the war. This is the first time of many that this is going to happen with her.
Yeah.
She's also going to run into problems with other doctors at the Indiana hospital. Do you remember how at that Syracuse school I mentioned it was kind of eclectic and they promoted different types of medicine and philosophy?
Yeah.
Well, this alternative medical philosophy led her to have arguments with other doctors over the patient's need for amputations. In many cases before the amputation, Walker would talk with a patient and sit there and say, I don't think you need to cut your arm off. I don't think you need to. I don't think it's necessary. Naturally, this is going to upset the doctors who had prescribed amputations. Probably they did so because they wanted to keep the line moving.
Well, that and they're being questioned by a woman.
Right. Walker would write after the war about this. She says, quote, many a man today has it for the perfect and good use of his limbs who would not have but for my advice. So she's basically going behind the doctor's orders and causing problems, which you can imagine. Even today, that would be a problem.
Yeah.
But especially then.
Yeah. And she's going to stay here and treat soldiers for a while. But then in 1862, she's going to travel near the front lines and to field hospitals. And the first place she goes is Fredericksburg, Virginia.
Right.
She's going to work at Chatham, which was also known as Lacey House. And here she would treat soldiers and prepare them for travel back to Washington, D.C. And it's here she encounters other prominent figures in the Civil War, including Walt Whitman and Clara Barton.
She makes her own blue uniform, homespun. She makes a homemade green sash to show she was a battlefield physician. And she, like you said, she basically brought soldiers back and forth to the Lacey House from the front. She wasn't up the front just yet. But you mentioned Clara Barton as well as poet Walt Whitman. Whitman had his brother George Washington Whitman was with the 51st New York, and he got injured. A shell took part of his jaw off at the Battle of Fredericksburg. So she would have met them there. And obviously that's where they met Clara Barton as well.
Whitman was a nurse, right? Walt Whitman was a nurse too.
He did some stuff in the medical, but he was specifically there because his brother was brother was there. That was the big deal. But in early 1863, Walker was also doing her part to continue to push this women's movement, right? It wasn't just worried about herself. She set up a thing called the Home for Homeless Women, which was a place for women who got pregnant outside of marriage to go and have their babies. She also set up a Women's Relief Association, which helped raise funds for war widows and their families. I mean, for these things, as you can imagine, she's going to catch significant flack, for assisting pregnant women out of wedlock, which was still the third rail in the 1800s America. But again, she saw herself as someone who could help women in need and ignore those social stigmas. Walker is going to assist after the Battle of Gettysburg in July of 1863. But soon after, she shows up in Tennessee. So I can only assume she hooks up with the 11th to 12th Corps when they get shipped out west, because by late 1863, Walker finds herself in Chattanooga, Tennessee.
Yeah. And before this, she's associating with the U.S. Sanitary Commission. She'd already received unspoken approval from General Ambrose Burnside, which is going to lead to other generals seeking her approval. She's going to end up in Chickamauga. And she was continually denied requests to become more involved in the war effort at an official capacity. So she is just continuing on this volunteer basis. Now, in September of 1863, she is finally going to receive a commission in the U.S. Army as a contract acting assistant surgeon.
Right, but this is how she gets it, though, okay? She's going to meet one General George Thomas there. And the commander of the Army, the Cumberland, he's going to quickly take a shine to Walker in her medical skills. And he knew she was trying to get a commission as a doctor, okay? But reportedly, Walker told Thomas that she'd been unable to get a commission, but it must have stuck in his mind because a few months later, this is March of 64 now, the 52nd Ohio, under the command of Daniel McCook, he's one of the fighting McCooks, he needs a new surgeon. They were encamped in northern Georgia at the time, and General Thomas felt that Mary Walker would be the perfect candidate for the job. So he suggested, hey, listen, why don't you go approach McCook and see about getting this job? So she did, and back then, when you're hiring a new field surgeon, it was customary to pass an exam first by the United States Army's Medical Board, which was headed at this time by a guy named Grover Perrin, who was a doctor. Now, this board is made up of all male doctors, obviously, and they met with her and conducted the exam. Now, when the exam was over, The doctors who did not appreciate the concept of a female doctor in their regiment, by the way, naturally, what do they do to her?
They failed her.
They flunked her.
Yep.
And the board told her, quote, she had no more medical knowledge than an average housewife or a nurse. Now, you can only imagine how Walker must have felt with this feedback, but more important, you can only imagine how George Thomas felt after his recommendation was ignored. Oh, no.
Yeah. Oh, no.
Right?
Well, this is the same guy who was like, after the Battle of Chattanooga or Battle of Chickamauga Chattanooga, and they're making the, National Cemetery. And he's just like, I'm tired of states' rights. Mix them up. Like he does not like BS.
No, so he takes his medical board's findings and he says, well, the hell with this. So he's going to override their decision. He's the boss. So George Thomas will personally hire Walker to be the contract assistant surgeon for the 52nd Ohio, thus making Dr. Mary Walker the first female surgeon in U.S. Army history. She'll get $80 a month as the 52nd Ohio surgeon, and soon she'll be sent to their camp at Lee and Gordon's Mill on Red Belt Road on the west side of Chickamauga Creek, which is about 2 miles northeast of Chickamauga, Georgia. Now, this was March of 64, so the Confederates were not far away from Lee and Gordon's Mill. And because of the war, there was a lack of doctors in the area to help treat, honestly, local civilians as well. I mean, all the men likely had gone off to war or God knows what, so there was a lot of medical issues in the area. So what Thomas and McCook decide, they thought it would be a good idea for Mary Walker to go beyond the Union picket line and try to assist the locals in need of medical care. Although it sounds like a nice gesture, there was likely a motive behind it.
Yes, and that is, for her to keep a listen or look out for stuff. So she's basically becoming a spy for them, and she's going to gather intelligence for the Union Army when she's off doing these medical, dental, and surgical calls for the local that are beyond, but that are in Confederate territory.
Yeah, just look, while you're out there, here's a pistol, because she had a gun with her.
Yep.
If you happen to see where the Confederates are located, come back, let us know. So this means now Mary Walker is going to be a spy. Now, Walker was extremely patriotic and probably felt that she owed this to Thomas, and basically because he helped her get the job she wanted. Well, just imagine she's wearing a blue uniform, she's bopping around by herself in enemy territory, and she's going to approach a rebel picket line. Hazardous, too. And guess what happens?
She gets caught.
She gets captured, of course she does, and Walker was taken to Richmond, Virginia as a captured spy to Castle Thunder, and it would spend the next 4 months of her life as a prisoner of war. Now, the thing about it, though, what separates Walker from a lot of these spies, a lot of these people, unlike people like Sarah Edmonds or Mary Tepe, Walker did not pretend to be a man. She kept her hair in long curls despite the trousers. She was extremely proud of being a woman and wanted everyone to know that women could do the same jobs that men could, even back then. I mean, I imagine her gender is why she was sent to Castle Thunder instead of Libby. Libby was a much harder experience for POWs.
Yep.
But regardless, Walker's experience at Castle Thunder was no picnic either.
No.
No, she wrote letters home, and it's obvious that Castle Thunder had their own Mr. Higgins.
Oh, Mr.
Right?
Higgins from our Sesnola episode.
This is the guy who was basically reading and censoring mail at Libby. So the letters she wrote during her imprisonment were much, much different than the ones she wrote afterwards. So she writes home. One of her first letters in July of 1864, Mary's going to write her mother while she's at Castle Thunder, and she writes, this is her quote now, "I hope you are not grieving about me because I am a prisoner of war. I am living in a 3-story brick castle with plenty to eat and a clean bed to sleep in. I am plenty happy here. The officers are gentlemen and kind, and it will not be long till I am exchanged." Okay, so she sounds like she's a clubette.
Yeah.
That's what she does. She was right about the exchange thing, though. On August 12, 1864, Mary Walker is exchanged for a rebel surgeon, a major from Tennessee. And she was so thrilled about that because for her to be exchanged for an officer meant that Confederates felt that she was an officer. So that kind of helped her out a little bit. After she was released, though, she wrote another letter home which contradicted much of what she said in that previous letter. Now safely away from the Confederates and probably from the eyes of Mr. Higgins, Walker writes, quote, "The peas were always wormy. The rice was sometimes good, but usually musty and contained vermin. The bacon in several instances was so rotten that its odor was unendurable to me." But she also got herself in hot water while she was in prison too, because she refused to wear a women's uniform.
Yeah, she refused to wear it. It was said to be more becoming of her sex, but she was like, "I'm not wearing this."
And when you look at these two letters too, I mean, we joke about the whole Mr. Higgins censor thing. That's probably true, but it's also possible she wrote that everything is awesome, because this way her family wasn't going to worry about her.
Yeah.
It had to have been a scary situation to know your daughter is a prisoner of war in Richmond, Virginia for spying.
Yeah. Not a good time.
So who knows why? It was probably a little bit of both. But now as a free woman, Walker is going to immediately return to Washington and try to get back to the front of her new assignment.
Yeah.
She reaches out to General William Sherman, of all people, who tells her, nope, no thanks. But Walker was ultimately sent to a female military prison in Louisville, Kentucky, as well as an orphan asylum in Clarksville, Tennessee. But during the 10 months there, her health began to fail, caused by her time at Castle Thunder.
Yeah, she had like a kind of a muscular dystrophy from like her time there.
She had a really bad eye infection. Yeah. She had some kind of MS thing.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, her days of being a surgeon were over because her health her experience in prison did really, really take a toll on her. And her days were done. She requested to leave the Army when her contract ran out. Like you said, she was contracted. This time, Mary, it's going to be no surprise to you. The Army quickly responded and said, Yep,
you're gone.
Not this time. No problem at all. Walker actually petitioned President Lincoln to be given the rank of major. Not a fake title, but a real one. I'm just going to leave that right there. But Walker did receive a disability pension of $8.50 a month from her health issues that she got at Castle Thunder, which began on June 13th of 1865. It actually increased to $20 a month in 1899.
Wow.
Pretty not bad. Good money. But once the war was over, the word of Mary Walker's service to the Army began to spread. It became quickly obvious to everyone that no one really understood how to recognize her service. Mm-hmm. By then, Abraham Lincoln was dead, and Andrew Johnson was president, and so he asked Secretary of War Edwin Stanton to look into it, to find a way to recognize her for her effort. Stanton felt that she probably should maybe receive a commission or minimum find a way to honor Walker's service, so he called on his judge advocate general, Joseph Holt, to look into it. Remember who Joseph Holt was?
Oh, he was on the Mary Surratt.
He was the chief prosecutor of the Lincoln assassination trial at Fort McNair. And so here he is again. But anyways, Holt began to investigate, into her story. And he concluded that the commission was probably not appropriate for Walker. Again, she's a woman and no one had ever gotten one. But he did feel that according to the official language or the guidelines for the Congressional Medal of Honor, that she should receive one. So on November 11th of 1865, President Johnson signed a bill to announce that, quote, for patriotic zeal in her hardships as a prisoner of war, Dr. Mary Edwards Walker will receive the Medal of Honor for her meritorious service. The official ceremony was on January 24th of 1866, and she proudly wore that medal on her jacket lapel, along with her trousers and her reform costume, and wore it to every public occasion going forward. That day, Mary Walker became the first, and to this date, the only woman to ever awarded the Medal of Honor.
Yep.
Now, in the years following the war, Walker attended veterans reunions with the 52nd Ohio. She was an honored guest at the Tri-State reunion in 1879. Again, thanks to her Medal of Honor status, she's a celebrity now. While she was being celebrated for her efforts in the Civil War, though, she continued to use her fame to continue to push women's causes.
Yep, she really gets involved in the women's suffrage movement after the war.
Right. She never loses her passion for women's rights, especially, like you said, when it comes to the vote. And she'll spend the rest of her life trying to win that right for her gender.
Yep.
She got involved with a campaign to get suffrage called the American Equal Rights Association, which included activists such as Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Susan B. Anthony, and a female attorney named Velma Lockwood, who was a friend of Walker from another group they had called the Universal Franchise Suffrage Group. Mm-hmm. But again, not surprising, Walker did not get along with the other women in the suffrage movement.
No, and Lucy Stone is going to be there too. In 1869, she goes on a lecture tour of the Midwest and she participates in a Cincinnati suffrage convention, and that's attended by Lucy Stone and Susan B. Anthony. Walker does make an unsuccessful effort to vote in Oswego town, which is her hometown, in 1872 as well.
Mm-hmm. And the funny part about when you look at the difference between Elizabeth Cady Stanton, very stern woman, very progressive, very good for what she was doing, the main disagreement was that they felt there needed to be a constitutional amendment written specifically to give women the right to vote. Walker disagreed with them and felt that we already have one. It's the 14th Amendment, which gives us the right to vote by virtue of being citizens of the United States. Her theory was the Constitution says we the people, not we the men. And since people are citizens, women are included. Now, it's tough to stretch it out because read Section 2 of the 14th Amendment.
Yeah.
It specifically talks about voting rights being for males. So this internal debate raged on between this group of women's suffragists. I mean, you can only imagine the fun meetings that must have been with them.
God.
You know? But for Walker, race and gender were the same. And since they were now citizens, we don't need a new amendment.
Yeah.
And then Walker did try to make a case that women should have the vote before black men. And in June of 1868, she promoted the, quote, the White Women's Franchise Association, which only lasted about 2 months. And this is a real bad moment for Walker as an abolitionist, for what they were trying to do. But it all became moot anyways because the United States Supreme Court decided that the 14th Amendment did not give women the right to vote. They were very clear about it. Walker then became part of the National Women's Suffrage Association in 1898, which included, again, Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony. The goal now was to push for an amendment for women's suffrage. And even then, Walker still claimed the 14th Amendment should still cover it. She never let that go. I mean, she's just,
Yep. She's, and the other thing she does too in her life is she maintains her interest in dress reform. She adopts as her regular clothing not just only trousers, but a masculine jacket, a shirt, stiff wing collar, bow tie, and a top hat. And she's frequently arrested for wearing men's clothing, although she herself stated, "I don't wear men's clothing, I wear my own clothes."
Well, she was arrested in 1900 in New Orleans, and it wasn't for wearing men's clothing. You read a lot of the articles, they say she was arrested because she was creating a scene. A crowd would gather around her to mock her, and it was disturbing the peace. And that's what she got arrested for, is for basically disturbing the peace and being whatever. Yeah. She wrote a small book called The Crowning Constitutional Argument, and it's going to, again, push her belief in the importance of the 14th Amendments, but it didn't change any minds. A lot of people, especially in the women's suffrage group, had kind of tuned her out at this point, because it was the same thing. Somebody who always says the same damn thing, never starts to just finally tune them out, kind of like I do to you sometimes. But that's kind of what happened with her. Oh, eventually, they got tired of hearing it from Walker, and they booted her from the National Women's Suffrage Association, saying she was too controversial and too divisive. They said, enough is enough. We don't get along with you. Mary tried to run for Congress in 1881 and 1890, but again, she was not allowed to be on the ballot. By 1900, she lost her membership and was banned from attending the white suffrage meetings. Not that it's banned her,
How?
But she continued to push for the vote any way she could, using her Medal of Honor to help her credibility with the nation. In a speech to the Union League, Walker said, quote, "Nothing great or good has ever been accomplished without the cooperation of women." Let's keep that in mind, right?
True.
Now, things began to change around World War I. Now, the First World War, it made Congress, and the military specifically, look closer at the rules concerning eligibility for the Medal of Honor. And in June of 1916, a Medal of Honor review board was created to update the rules for its eligibility. The Medal of Honor review board was headed by 5 generals, with a former Antietam, Chancellorsville, and Overland campaign vet, Nelson Miles, running the board. Of the 2,625 Medals of Honor awarded at that point, the board voted to rescind 911 of them. 864 alone were members of the 27th Maine, who stayed behind and guarded Washington during the Gettysburg campaign and never participated in the battle. 29 were members of Abraham Lincoln's funeral guard. One was a grieving father who lost his son in the Civil War, and 5 more were regular citizens, including Buffalo Bill Cody, proving that even when something called Buffalo Bill actually wins something, they find a way to screw that up. The last one they took away was from Dr. Mary Walker, claiming, quote, there is no evidence of distinguished gallantry and no combat engagement. So Walker was informed of this decision, and they told her, listen, you need to send your medal back to Washington. So what do you think she did?
Oh, I'd be like, F you, you're not getting my fucking medal back.
Oh, here we go. That's why there's an E. But naturally, of course, she refused to return it, and she continued to wear it proudly whenever she made a public appearance, kind of to, stick it to him. One person who was extremely proud of Mary's medal was her younger brother, Alva Walker. Remember, the only boy, right?
Yep.
He fought in the war with the 184th New York, Company B, and he participated in the Battle of Cedar Creek on October 19, 1864 in the Army of the Shenandoah. Now, he was so proud of Mary getting the Medal of Honor, his sister. He died in 1890, so he never had to live knowing the government had taken it away, because that would have just killed him.
Yeah.
Mary spent the rest of her days making money giving speeches and still pushing for the women's right to vote. She returned to Washington to see about a job with the American Red Cross when she tripped and fell on the street. They took her back to her hometown of Oswego, where she was recuperating from her fall at the home of a guy named Dr. Frank Dwyer. But the combination of her failing health and that fall she took are going to be too much for her body to overcome, and Mary Walker is going to die on February 21st, 1919.
She's 86.
86 years old. Walker's funeral was going to be in her home in Oswego, New York, and was simple and somber. A U.S. flag covered her casket, and she was buried in a black suit and was buried in Rural Cemetery in Oswego. 2 days after her death, the New York Herald wrote, quote, Dr. Mary Walker was true to her own queer individuality, as few human beings have ever been. Now, the great travesty of her death is just a year later, on August 18th, 1920, the 19th Amendment to the Constitution is going to be ratified, giving women the right to vote. So her entire life's work, she never got to see it happen. She missed it by 1 year.
At least she tried.
It's a big, and why she tried is why it likely happened. I mean, it wasn't just obviously her, but she was persistent, right?
Yeah.
Dr. Mary Walker's story is amazing because it didn't end with her death in 1919. In 1977, the United States government again reviewed the qualifications for the Medal of Honor, and after reviewing her case, decided to reinstate her medal.
Yep.
On June 10th, 1977, President Jimmy Carter, he signed the bill reinstating Dr. Walker's Medal of Honor, and a Medal of Honor marker was officially added to her gravesite. Now jump ahead all the way, Mary, to August 25th, 2023.
Oh, I love this part.
Fort A.P. Hill in Caroline County, Virginia, at the location we were just at the Garrett Farm where John Wilkes Booth died, was renamed Fort Walker after Mary Walker. But just like her Medal of Honor was taken away in 1917, Fort Walker was renamed in June of 25 back to A.P. Hill. But wait, like the ShamWow guy says, Mary, there's more. Instead of being named for Confederate General Ambrose Powell Hill, Fort A.P. Hill is now named for veterans Bruce Anderson, Albert Pinn, and Edward Hill. A.P. Hill. Yep.
What I found funny is that when it was originally changed from Fort A.P. Hill to, General A.P. Hill to Fort Walker, it's like, wow, it's the guy who had a lot of health problems.
Yeah.
The fort is now being renamed after him for a doctor.
For a doctor who also had health problems, come to think of it.
Yeah.
But when you look at the life of Mary Edwards Walker, though, it's hard to find a woman who had made more of an impact to American history. Now, again, she was a patriotic trailblazer who never gave in to her beliefs and let nothing stand in her way. Her impact today is everywhere, as there are countless women in the military, there are doctors, and her impact is even seen in today's daily, women's fashion.
Yep.
She helped revolutionize the legality of divorce, which made it possible for women to leave marriages who were trapped when they previously had no recourse. She gave up a lot for what she believed in regards to social status and reputation. I mentioned before, she was arrested in 1870 for wearing clothes just as men. But yet, as they say, Mary, she persisted, right?
Yep.
Near the end of her life, she wrote of her conflicts, quote, No one knows or will ever know what this has cost me to live up to my principles, to be consistent with my convictions and declarations. But I will have done it, and I am not sorry for it. You know, though there are many significant women who have changed American history and society for the better, in my opinion, no one, looking at the life of Dr. Mary Edwards Walker, in my opinion, no women did more.
I agree.
And it's something when you look at her, because when you look at everything she did, she was like the 19th century Forrest Gump.
Yeah.
Everything she did well.
Yeah.
But she always seemed to be held back, and she lived many lives. She lived about 5 different lives. And it's good to see her get some recognition. But I think if you ask the average person, you know, it's Women's History Month, name 5 substantial women in the 19th century. You're going to hear Susan B. Anthony. You're going to hear Elizabeth Cady Stanton. You're probably going to hear Clara Barton.
Yep.
You're going to go
And
far
not that
down the
there's
list.
anything, and Harriet Tubman, but not that there's anything wrong with that. It's just Mary Walker deserves and needs to be recognized with those women as well.
Considering what she did, she does not get the press and publicity
No.
that she deserves, and that's my opinion. Because the people who listen to this episode, or they know about her or read about her, it's stunning that someone like this could exist, and she's not on a coin. Or
Yeah.
she's not.
Well, she is on a coin.
I mean, like
Yeah.
mainstream. I mean,
Yeah.
she seems to have maintained that B level for a lot of people. Not for me, but for a lot of people, I think, who just don't seem to appreciate what she did for whatever reason.
Yeah.
I mean, when you look at today at women's fashion, divorce law, all these things, this all goes back to Mary Walker.
Yeah.
Usually it's one person does this, one person does that. She kind of did everything. And the thing about it's important to understand with her, like we've talked about, and you know this, is she never veered off of it. She never gave in to the public pressure
Yeah.
to quit. She never did anything as far as trying to apologize for it. She did what she did. If you don't like it, hit the bricks. I don't care.
Yeah,
I'm doing it.
she didn't care, and that's what I admire about her, is she stood by what she believed, you know, throughout her entire life. You know, just that quote from her, "I'm not wearing a man's clothes, I'm wearing my clothes." That's how strongly she felt. And she's very ahead of her time, like many of these women were in the 19th century. She's very ahead of her time, but even then she clashed with some of them as well, because she was like, no, we already have the right to vote. It's written in the Constitution.
Yeah, and I think that's a big part of it too. I think that is that they thought maybe she was being a little bit too forceful, trying to burn out, but she never did. She never did, and and it's a real shame that she didn't live until 1920 to see that, because I think she would have really, really appreciated that, and I think she would have been something who she'd been very, very, very proud for. So
Completely agree.
So she's an important story. So hopefully people can study her. Hopefully people can appreciate her as not just because it's Women's Month, because it's any month. Because she's somebody who, if you're female yourself, everybody's got a mother, everybody's got sisters. What those strong women are in your life today, a lot of it can get traced back to Dr. Mary Edwards Walker.
Yeah.
And that's just important for everybody to understand.
Well, I'd like to think, like, when I was, growing up, I did not like to wear like dresses or anything really girly. I like to wear pants and stuff. And, just feel like that's kind of a little bit of Mary Walker in me there. Like, I didn't want to, be real girly or whatever.
No, everyone has to be the first person to do it, and she was the trailblazer on it, and so it's easy to walk the blaze path. But again, it gives you confidence knowing that somebody did it. And that's what's important about her. And there's a lot of people like that in history. But she's always resonated with me because I like the idea of that rebellious feeling, that spirit. But she was also a patriot, and she was also a spy, and she was also everything.
And she's respected by men like Ambrose Burnside and General Thomas, which is, that says a lot right there too.
It does. It does. Well, I guess we can drop that here. I think that's a good story we can drop here. But she's an important person. She's just really. It's hard not to like and appreciate her because of everything she's done and everything she's done for people that we know today.
I agree.
So what's up for us next?
So our next episode in 2 weeks will be Glorietta Pass, which we will be recording on the anniversary of it on March 28th. So we are going back to the Trans-Mississippi Theater because we have been there before. After that, we will be talking about Shiloh, other episodes that we have planned for this year. are the election of 1880. So that is between Garfield and Hancock, and we are also talking about possibly doing an episode about Lily's Battery from Chickamauga.
No, we get a lot of fun stuff in the neighborhood. So if you are in the neighborhood, we are going to be this Saturday over at Getty's Gear doing our episode, a live studio audience episode. We're not recording it, unfortunately, but we're going to be doing it there for the Irish Brigade. And so if you're there, hopefully we'll see you. Look forward to seeing people there. Always nice to meet new people and talk Civil War and nerd out. Besides someone like you, so it's always you, but now we get to talk to different people.
I'm sorry.
Anyway, so any final words from you before we jump off?
Well, thank you to you for bringing it like you always do. I'm glad you suggested this as our episode to do for Women's History Month, and thank you to all our listeners for being with us for these last 165 episodes.
Time flies, 165, or before you know it, it'll be 200 more. So off we go. So everyone have a great weekend. The weather is warming up here. It was 80 degrees here in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania today. It's going to get a little chilly next week, but spring, it's
chilly. It's going to be like 50 degrees, which is seasonal. And people are like, oh my God, it's going to get cold.
This is fake spring. This is the tease spring. But it's coming. It's coming. Pretty soon the grass will be green, and I will be able to sit outside and enjoy being outside. So off we go. All right. So everybody have a great weekend. We look forward to talking to you all on the other side.
See y'all later.
Peace out.
Yep. Bye.